Okay, back on. Sorry about that. Thank you for bearing with us. We're back on. Say hello to the mic.
Hi, everyone.
I have to share this mic
Okay.
to ask Jelena test. How's it sound?
Hi, Jillian. Can you hear me? All right. So we'll give people a few moments to log on to join us again. Great. We are heard. Thosh and I are going to be switching back and forth with the microphone here. And Angie just joined. Hi, Angie. Becky Marquez. So we're very excited to share with you all today our model for holistic health and wellness called the 7 Circles of Wellness. Makes up the basis of the Well for Culture initiative. And it's all about looking at the different areas of our life where we can focus on so that we can live in balance. Good. There's my mom. Hi, Mommy. So we have a slideshow that we're going to be sharing with you all as well. And Thosh has figured out the screen sharing function on this. But before we get started with that, I'll just go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Chelsey Luger, and I'm a trainer for the Native Wellness Institute. And I am originally from the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa and from the Standing Rock and Cheyenne River Sioux tribes. And I was born and raised in North Dakota. And I live in Phoenix, Arizona now with my husband Thosh here and our daughter Aloe. Oh, we have a can't hear. Somebody just said they can't hear.
Someone says they can't hear. Can anyone else hear us? We're getting someone saying that they can't hear us. Okay, yeah, they can hear us fine.
All right. You want to introduce?
Yeah.
Introduce.
All right. Thanks everyone for bearing with us. Skuk Dosh to everybody. My name is Thosh, and if you've been on here once before, a couple times before, we did a food demo. We also did some movement, and so this time we're going to share a little bit more. It's going to be a little bit less interactive, so hopefully you're okay to sit down for a little bit. But if we need to, we'll get up and do some movement. But like Chelsey said, we're going to share a little bit of our wellness model that we call 7 Circles of Wellness. And this is something that we put our minds together by just exploring and looking back at our own wellness journey, and also, of course, considering our upbringing, considering the teachings that we learned from all of our ancestors, from our elders, our knowledge bearers in our communities, but also traveling around Native country. And I myself have had the privilege of being able to travel Native country since I was a teen for over 20 years, and just learning from different Native people, and learning about the similarities of all of our cultures, and our value systems. And so we thought about it, and we said, what are the areas, what are the aspects that create or that play a role in how well we are? And we put this together, and we also considered a lot of what's happening in functional medicine and the areas that they are starting to study and look at to find out all these different areas that are determinants of our spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional health. I mean, as we know, our ancestors have followed models that were inherent to the cultural values, inherent to their culture of the time. And so, as we all know, that today in our period, that we have gotten away from living a certain way as a result of colonialism and such. So our little model here is really just we think of it as a template, is a little bit of a guideline to be able to kind of follow and implement your people's teachings, your people's language, and any of your other cultural values to be inside of this. So we're gonna go ahead and anything else you want to share before we move in? Yeah. And so if you didn't make it to any of our other previous Facebook lives that we've done right here in the Native Wellness Institute Power Hour. Like I said, we did some stuff on food demo. We did some stuff on movement, and our little initiative, Well for Culture, is something that we started in 2015, and we do this work through the Native Wellness Institute and just grassroots in our communities and traveling around Native country for the past 5 years, just sharing about the initiative to help to shift the people's consciousness in regards to health and why health is important for the preservation or the evolution of our indigeneity, and how our culture is wellness based. So we want to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to jump into our we're going to do a little slide. We're going to do a little slideshow of some ideas within this wellness model that we're gonna get into. So this one, now that I'm in here, let's get over to share screen. Now it's not showing me. It's not showing me anymore, that feature. It showed it before. My apologies, everyone, for bear with us for a moment. There was supposed to be a feature here, and I'm not seeing it to be able to share our screen. We have slides right here for you, but if we have to, we can do it without the slides there. Just give me one moment.
You need a Chrome extension.
Oh, I thought I downloaded that. Let's see.
Manycam.
Once again, everyone, sorry about this technical difficulties here. Have never done this actually through Facebook Live. We've done this no problem over Zoom and other things, but for some reason the no longer give me the feature to share the screen like it was showing when I was first getting on. So we're just gonna jump into it. We're gonna jump into it. And we're gonna do it just speaking to you. And so we want to talk a little bit about the three teachings that our initiative is based upon. And the first teaching is this idea, and I just mentioned it a little while ago, is that our culture as Native people, no matter where we're at in the world, is wellness based. It's rooted in wellness. And as we know, in a lot of our languages, that we have words for, yes, a good life, but the term wellness in the context within the English language is much different. So that's the first thing to think about too during all of this, is that our culture is wellness based. Original indigenous ideology and practices is really rooted in culture. And the second thing is that the second teaching is this idea that healthy people make up those healthy families, and those healthy families are making up those healthy, strong, functioning nations. And this is, we believe, is really important, because it really makes us think about this idea, this concept about healing within. Healing ourselves is important because it's also about healing the family, and then healing the family is also about healing the community. So this is what it also brings into the multifaceted idea that wellness is not just about individuality, but it's about how connected, our interconnectedness of our community and our family. And so that's the second thing to think about right there, the second teaching. And the third teaching is within our initiative to think about is that good health and cultural teachings are interdependent. This is really important when we're talking about cultural preservation or cultural evolution, is that we need good health to be able to pass on our teachings. We need to be in great spiritual, physical, and emotional, mental good health to be able to pass on our teachings to the coming generations. And in my community, as many as others, what we're seeing is we're seeing people that are passing before they're even considered an elder. People that have knowledge and information are passing at a very young age from all the diseases of modernity that our people had never faced before, right? Diabetes, heart disease, cancer, cardiovascular diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, viruses that we've never had contact with before. And a lot of these are preventable. So it's really just showing that it's important that we look at our health in that way. Where our health is really important to pass on our languages, pass on our creation stories, the ceremonies, passing on all of our knowledge are about food systems, about tribal food sovereignty, about connecting to the land. Our health is really important. And like I said, I have witnessed that directly in my community, witnessing many people who had much to share, but their life was cut short. And so, and I say that from a place of love. It's not to shame those people that are battling those illnesses. We say that with love, and that's why we try to do this work right here, is to for all of our relatives that are battling and going through these things right here. Do you want to add anything to those? So we're going to move on. So we said there's 7 teachings, there's 7 circles in our life that play a role in how well we are. And the first one I want you to think about too is food, our relationship to food. And we've talked about this a lot in the past with our other Facebook Live presentation that we did. We did a food demo and we talked a little bit of ideas around food. And as we know with indigenous culture, that food was always at the center. It was at the center of our culture. And we know that just by oral tradition. We know that by looking at what allowed our ancestors to sustain and thrive in the climates that we have for as long as that we've had. It's because it was all about the relationship to the food. And we ask a lot of elders too, like, what were your parents doing or your parents doing when they were young? And a lot of times they tell us that they were doing something having to do with food, whether it be out harvesting, fishing, hunting, foraging, or planting. And so it was something that was up until very recently was the center of our culture. So that's what we like to think about with food, is think about that. How can we put it back at the center of our cultures again? And as we know, food affects us spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And when we talk about food from at a spiritual standpoint, my intuition or my understanding is that when we're engaging with our ancestral foods, or we're engaging with foods from Mother Earth, whether that be harvesting, or from the land, or what we cultivated the land, or fishing, hunting, we are aligning ourselves with that land. We are aligning ourselves with that very land there. We are tasting the flavors of our ancestors. We're directly connecting ourselves to the experience that our ancestors have experienced for thousands and thousands of years. So I always tell people, every time we in our house here, and when we have manoman, wild rice, when we have it cooking, it comes from Chelsey's part of her lineage. When we have that cooking, or when we have tamhun, the corn of our people right here in the desert in Arizona in the Southwest, when we have that cooking, the aroma that it lets off in the home is something that really grounds me. And then when I'm eating and tasting those flavors, that next to some wild meat such as venison, then I really feel a sense of connection. I'm connecting with the direct experience that our ancestors have had for a long time. And so I believe that food is that, as well as all the teachings, the ceremonies that are going into our food process. So food at a spiritual sense affects us. We also know that mentally, food affects how well we are thinking. And we know that food also impacts our emotion. It empowers us, or it makes us feel lethargic, makes us feel fatigue even, and of course physical. It's all connected right there. So those are some things to think about. I want people to think about food is something much more than nutrient value, much more than that. So I'm going to let Chelsey jump in.
Yes. So the food conversation is very complicated. And one thing that we like to acknowledge is that while, on one hand, of course, we very much encourage reconnecting to ancestral foods, we also understand that there's an access issue for a lot of people. And so we don't want to make anyone feel like there's no healthy way to eat if you don't have access to your ancestral foods. It's a journey and it's a process. And we just encourage folks to incorporate that as much as you possibly can, but also no judgment if that's not something that you have access to right now. Of course, as a product of colonialism, that was one of the first things that was taken away from our communities was our food systems, whether it was our hunting rights or the very land that we once utilized or the very water resources that once thrived and were then, our rivers were dammed and our land bases were minimized so severely, and there was a buffalo genocide, and there's been deforestation, and all of these things that have contributed to us not having access to our ancestral foods today. So just to clarify, there absolutely no judgment, and we're not purists by any means. We don't eat 100% ancestral ourselves. But we do encourage you to reconnect to those foods if and when you have the ability, because it can be a very empowering process. The next slide that we'll look at is, so again, just to reiterate what Thosh had said about food being mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. We're all familiar with the medicine wheel, and we're all familiar with the knowledge that our ancestors had in terms of recognizing how all of those different parts of life are interconnected. And so I know that growing up, I didn't realize that food could impact my emotions. I didn't realize that what I was eating could impact my academic performance or my ability to think clearly or study. There's so few foods that we actually directly associate in modern American culture with the mind. We think about coffee when we want to work hard, for example. And it's not just coffee. Any food or drink or beverage is either going to give you energy or take it away. And it's important to learn for yourself what those foods are and to try to use foods to heal yourself and make your life easier if you can. So that's just a little tip that I have there in that sense. And it's something that we talk about with students a lot. We remind, Native college students and high school students that if you can learn how to eat real foods and not just the fast food and frozen and boxed stuff, then you're going to feed your brain a lot better than what many college students are used to doing. And that's not just Native college students who are guilty of that. It's everyone. So just looking at food as this very powerful healing entity that we can reconnect with in a healthy way.
Yeah, and on our screen too, we have another. I don't know. I was just doing that earlier. On our screen, we have a slide that we wanted to share with you too that showed the physical, mental, emotional state of being associated with the gut-brain axis. And right now in Western medicine, that they've discovered that the central nervous system is connected to your enteric nervous system, your gut. And there's a super highway of neural synapses is going from one to the other. So anytime when things are in our gut, it affects our mind. Our mind, however, whatever it is perceiving and going through also impacts the state of our gut. So again, it's showing that food is so much more than just eating for nutrient value, but food it's important for our mental cognition. It's important for our clarity, for our memory. It's important for our brain to have all the nutrients to have foresight, to be able to see into the see positively into the future. All these kinds of things, complex thought process, all that is really important, and we need to be nourished for that. So that mind, that body, that spirit, the emotions, all that is all interconnected. And so a lot of times we'll ask people will ask us, what about a diet plan? And what kind of diet do you follow? And what we always say is that, we're we don't specifically advocate for any sort of diet in our initiative. We don't follow any kind of diet, and a lot of times, diet and people think of diet, they think of being miserable. They think of restriction. And so, what we always say is, let's think about food in terms of a relationship. Let's think about having a relationship to food. Think about food as an entity. It's something that you can have a relationship with. And for myself, I always think about I need to have that healthy relationship to food. and and what that means, there's a lot that goes into that, but to keep it short, we think about even mindful eating only when we are really hungry, and being able to differentiate if I'm truly hungry and need fuel, or if I'm just eating for boredom, or am I eating to self-medicate. Those are one of the first teachings when you're thinking about, excuse me, food is something to have a relationship with. And so instead, what we always like to remind and encourage people is that when we're using our languages too to talk about food, those are the way that we can most accurately describe the food that of our people. And I think about, if you think about in the concept of indigenous food or ancestral food, and if we had to put words to it using English language, I think that what we have a quote right here is that this is what we would describe it as, is that indigenous eating is seasonal, it's local, it's from the land, it's sustainable, it's nutrient dense, it has cultural significance, and it recognizes our relationship to food and views food as a spiritual process. And so this is why it's so complicated to talk about indigenous food and so-called indigenous or ancestral diet, because we have many different foods all across North America, right? So whatever is eating seasonal for you, that's eating as local as you can, and eating from your land, whatever kind of ceremonies that you have that you use to give thanks to the animal after harvesting it, or give thanks to the seeds before we plant it, and then give thanks to the squash, all of those things right there, that is encompasses indigenous food. So we always say it's more of a mindset. It's a philosophy, right? It's a way of life. And so I encourage people to think about all of those things, because as we know too, when we're talking about diet, like say we tried to prescribe all indigenous people, prescribe them one kind of diet, you're trying to, it's going across the board, and what that's doing is disregarding bio individuality. Bio individuality is that everybody is unique, even within the family of individuals. Everybody is unique, so there's many different things to take into account, right? Our genetics is something to take into account. Does that person have other kind of underlying health conditions, such as an autoimmune disorder of some sort? So again, now that's why we always refrain from using that word diet and talking about a diet. We just say it's, what's that? Yeah, and access and preference is all part of that too. So again, those are things that we always try to encourage our people to think about. Utilize your people's language, and we say over here they say "oh tam haichuhuk," and you can talk about what that means. And again, to sum it up, it's the quote I said earlier about it being seasonal from that land. So we want to move on, and we kind of shared this. I want to touch up on it too, just in case some of you didn't view the last one, but we shared in our first Facebook Live presentation that we did right here on the Power Hour, we shared that there is 7 things that we can do to strengthen our relationship to food. And the first one is the first food, which is to breastfeed, right? For mothers to breastfeed. And that was one that's recognized. That's the first food, right, of our people. And also the second one is to cook, is to learn to cook once again and to experiment. And I'm sure a lot of you are doing that now since you've been in quarantine during this era where we have not been eating out as much. You're learning to cook once again, and you're getting comfortable with that. It's important to learn to do that. We talked about that on the first live session that we did. And the second one is to continue to hunt for and fish for the meat that we want to eat, one of the most sustainable and ethical ways to eat meat. And then to give thanks, continue having gratitude, do your gratitude ceremonies, before you eat, or however your people and your family do it, is to keep giving thanks, keep gratitude at the forefront of your mind as you're eating. And that's also involved in mindful eating. And then the fifth thing right here is to harvest, is to continue to harvest food, whether that you went on the land, foraged, or whatever that is. And then the sixth is to grow, is to continue to grow food. Maybe you don't come from a nation that were originally farmers, but maybe it's something you can adopt today. And we do see that around native country a lot. We go to the plains or we go to the coast, and we see people that have adopted different agriculture practices and farming and gardening practices, because our world has changed and we have to adapt in some way. So our culture changes. Maybe it becomes part of your people's traditional culture to farm because of the world, because of what we're living in today. And the last thing is learning to shop smart in the grocery store. Shopping smart is really important. I know that when you go into a grocery store, it could be kind of confusing and overwhelming. We get in there, there's just a plethora of different options to choose from, but we always encourage people is to stay on the aisle. Stay on the aisles, because what's on the aisle? The produce and all of the meat is on the aisle. All real natural foods, even though some of them are genetically modified or got pesticides on them. They're all food that came from the land, and our body's it's gonna do much better for our body to be eating whole real food, as opposed to going into the aisles and picking tons of food in boxes and bags, cans, jars, all that kind of stuff that have preservatives and additives, food colorings, that we have to basically be a scientist to be able to even know what these are. And a lot of these ingredients are so new. They're new, less than 10 years they've been used in the food supply. And the scientists don't know what sort of impact that's going to have on our health. So again, this is all kind of talking about this circle of food. If you're just joining us, 7 circles of wellness, that first circle is food. And so we always tell people, find out what food is right for you. Find out what foods are right for your mind, your body, your spirit. What do you have access to? What do you have access to? What's within your budget? And we know that there's a lot of talk, of course, at all times of eating organic or eating non-GMO or eating grass-fed, and these are really kind of controversial topics to, I guess, bring up, because as many of you know, and many of you are probably in regions where you don't have access to that. We hear about people talk about that a lot in mainstream wellness, but they forget that many people, a large percentage of people in the United States and Canada, don't have access to these sorts of foods. Either they're not available, or they're just out of the budget, and that's really unfortunate. So I think that it's okay for people to eat, meat that's not grass fed. It's much better than going through what we're going to go through, a drive through, and eat what's there, right? So what if that food has been genetically modified, or it's got a little bit of herbicide, pesticide? They've already shown that even so-called organic foods have residue of herbicides and pesticides on them. It's in our food supply, it's in our water, and it's a really complicated topic, and I know I'm leaving a lot out, but it's something to consider. It's something for all of you out there to consider, to not have shame for not being able to eat that way, and eat as close to Mother Earth as you can as possible, and find out what's right for your body. And Chelsey and I even discovered that in our home. For instance, I can withstand more amounts of fiber than Chelsey can, because she gets, sometimes she'll get a tummy ache from it. And maybe it's from the genetics of the Southwest people and me that had a high fiber in their diet, corn, bean, and squash. Chelsey does a little bit better with carbohydrate consumption, and I don't. So everyone is different, and you must discover what's right for you. We encourage everyone to really do that. So do you want to share mindful eating? You want to do that? Yeah, I'm gonna pass it over to Chelsey because I'm being a hog.
We're just managing the baby here. Okay, so I want to take a look at some of the comments and just see if lots of comments here. And yep, Wade made an interesting comment. The herbicides and pesticides and stuff like that are showing up in wild game, even because the animals are eating it from the crop fields. So yes, and Jasmine Curlin, great comment. Being certified organic is a matter of being able to pay for the certification. So it's just this very, very complex. We're not necessarily saying organic is bad. We're just saying it's much more than what meets the eye. And so kind of getting rid of the shame around that. Thank you for that compliment. We're awesome parents. We appreciate that. Okay, so next we're going to get into A little bit of some mindful eating practices. Why we love mindful eating is because it's something that everybody has access to and it doesn't cost a thing. So whether you're having an elk backstrap with some wild harvested spinach, or whether you're having Pizza Hut, we can eat mindfully. So the first thing is to try your best to differentiate between emotional hunger and true hunger. Now, emotional eating is real. It is a very valid concern. It's a very valid health condition that many people are suffering from. And usually, when people are emotional eaters, there's a whole history to that. And whether it has to do with traumas that we've experienced or just the way that food culture had taken place over the course of years in our own homes, emotional eating is something that almost everybody does, in fact. And so, trying your best if you're struggling with portion control and if you want to address that issue, then trying to differentiate and between emotional hunger and true hunger. And sometimes that's just a matter of really focusing on and kind of having a conversation with yourself. Why do I want to eat right now? And why am I specifically choosing this certain food? And just have a gentle conversation with yourself about that. The next mindful eating practice is to observe the flavor, textures, smells, and colors of what you're eating. So, enjoying your food, appreciating your food, and eating slowly will definitely, in the long run, impact your health, because the more mindfully we eat, the more likely we are to choose foods that truly make us feel good. And as we mentioned, food is going to impact your emotions, your physical state, your energy. And so the more mindful we are about choosing rather than just, you know, whatever is around, then it will impact our health in the long run. The next is to eat just enough until you feel satiated. And I know this is a huge challenge, but again, the key to that is trying to eat a little bit more slowly. That is going to help your body, your brain, trigger your body to let you know whether you're full or not. Um, the next one is to avoid using all electronic devices during eating. Try shutting off the TV. I mean, I know it's fun, on a Friday night to have a movie and pizza with your family and that kind of thing. So that's totally fine. We're not hating on that. But what we're talking about is on a day-to-day basis. Your everyday breakfast and lunch and dinner with your family, make that a time of conversation rather than a time of scrolling, and make that a time where we can really communicate with one another as families. And that's going to impact our total wellness as families, not just in a dietary way, but in a holistic way. So showing each other and showing your food the respect of paying it attention instead of being on your phone. Finally, consider where your food came from. When you see your food on your plate, think about all of the hands that went into harvesting or hunting or growing that food. Think about, whether it's strawberries that were grown in California or whether it is a elk that your friend had hunted. Think about my Shadron comes to mind for that, but think about where your food come from, and think about having gratitude for all of the work that went into to getting that food on your plate. Again, even if it's fast food, even if it's especially if it's something like fast food, because when we're mindful of the commodity chain, then again we're more likely to support foods that have not contributed to the exploitation of plant life, animal life, indigenous communities, and so forth. We know that especially our indigenous relatives in South America, but all over really, are currently experiencing a lot of social injustices and food injustices due to overexploitation of their lands. to feed the palate of the average American. So if we think about the commodity chains of where our food is coming from, then we're more likely to do our best to make ethical choices. Um, so we're food, as you can tell, the food conversation takes a long time and we could actually talk all day about it, but that's just one of the 7 circles of wellness. So we're going to do our very best to kind of rapid fire get through all of the other circles as quickly as we can. And the next topic is movement. You want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, like Chelsey said, there's a lot to say, and so we're just kind of, forgive us for not being able to cover everything. And I always say you can't cover everything having to do with health and wellness in our culture through a social media post. You can't cover everything through some 1-hour presentation. So we're kind of just speeding through things right here, trying to give you ideas and thoughts. And so, second circle of wellness is actually sleep, and sleep is a really important determiner of our health. And we didn't hear about that a lot until recently, right? Except for oral tradition and our elders, or if you're older and you're raised, by older generation, you heard about the importance of sleep. But it kind of escaped dominant culture, and now they're kind of understanding, even from their perspective, that sleep is really important for our total health. And I always think, to a lot of oral tradition growing up in my community, people talked about the nighttime as something to respect, that the nighttime isn't something that we just go out and venture into, is that if we're at night somewhere, we have to be near the fire. And so the nighttime is a time reserved for other things to be happening, as they say. But so that's really important, even from that cultural perspective. Also, during the time that happens when we sleep, as we know, to our people, what's really important to us is dreams. And if you're not getting adequate and healthy sleep, then we are basically not giving ourselves that opportunity to be in that dream state. We know that in our dreams, we learn things, we learn information, we learn songs, we learn teachings. Sometimes we have connections with relatives who have already passed on, or ancestors that are in other spirit worlds. So from our perspective as Native people, that's the importance of sleep. That's that dream state. And I think that our ancestors understood sleep really well, because they knew that the next day presented a lot of obstacles, and that you needed to be clarity in your mind. You need to be well rested, because your survivals depended upon your physical capabilities and your durability. So now what Western medicine and other Eastern medicine has known for a long time, what they're saying is that sleep is also important for neurogenesis. So if you're in the process of learning new things, no matter what age you are, that when you sleep, those nerve cells actually mature. Sleep's important for our immune system. You're hearing about that a lot today during the era of the coronavirus, is that we need good, healthy sleep, because that's when your immune system is at work. That's when your immune system functions. Memory consolidation happens too when you're sleeping. So if you're learning songs and you're learning language, you're learning to tell the creation stories, we know that we can't sit there with a note, or an iPad to try to read off of. You need to go off your memory bank. And that's how a lot of people were, and some still are today, that I grew up singing with. They'll just rattle off song after song and sing all night. And that's what we have to continue on. Memory is important for those kinds of things, and our sleep is really important for that. Sleep also too is good for if you're exercising, then your body's burning adipose tissue, body fat. And if you're building muscle, that's when it actually builds, is when you're sleeping. So sleep's a really important thing. And it's important to try to go to sleep, they say, at the same time. And a lot of you probably have heard this: go to sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time. And that's something that we try to actually do as well. I try to wake up around 5:30 every day. Go to sleep between 9:30 and 10:30 every night. And I try to get a good 7.5 hours sleep. I found that's what works for me. And so it's different for everyone. Everyone requires different amounts of sleep, and you have to discover what that is. But I always hear too, also, oral tradition from the ancestors talk about that when the sun went down, and a lot of you probably remember this, the people would go inside. There was no reason to be out unless there was ceremonial time or something. So this is something with the advent of technology, right, that has changed since we got lighting and computer equipment to stay up all night. It has changed our culture. But it's important that we try to realign with those original way that our human beings have lived. So we're going to move on to the next circle of movement, and this one is this next circle of wellness is about movement. And movement is medicine, is what we say, and what a lot of people have always said. And if we even look at our dances today, we see that our people were great athletes to be able to dance the way that they danced. And we know that it's even a challenge for us today to do some of that. We know that a lot across native country, a lot of our ancestors were runners. They had ran far distances, or they played different types of games to resolve conflict, or they played games as medicine for the people, to bring entertainment, to bring healing, laughter. So athleticism is our culture. Athleticism is our way of life as native people. We are naturally, inherently gifted athletes. And so it's about uncovering that today. And we know that in our original culture, native people moved all day long, building stuff, working. It was a very active lifestyle. We know that today we're very sedentary because of our culture today, right? We know that now that sitting is the new smoking. So what we say today is it's important to make movement your culture today. Make movement a part of your way of life. Have a spiritual purpose for moving your body. And that's going to be different for everyone. So it's within our innate humanity to want to move our body, and you should honor that. And so even if you don't do any sort of movement, you can find out what that is for you. So that's why we don't really say exercise or working out, because movement encompasses everything from a swift walk to jogging to hiking to riding in the canoe to working with the horse to working in the field all day long to doing Zumba, some sort of dance, yoga, combat sports, playing with your kids, functional sports, conventional sports. All of that is movement. And the best exercise is the one that you are going to continue to do over and over and over again. So no matter your age, no matter your athletic ability, you must find out what movement modality works for you, because as we know that movement affects also our spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional well-being. We know that when we exercise our body, it changes the brain chemistry. When you're learning new movements, it changes the brain chemistry. And they're also finding out that physical movement helps protect the mental faculties into old age. And all the elders, we know we need their memory good so they can pass on vital indigenous knowledge. So we know that movement is important because it helps regulate blood sugar. And that's something that's really important for all of our people that are type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic, or people that are trying to get their weight down. Movement helps to regulate blood sugar. It also helps to reduce stress and anxiety because of the feel-good neurotransmitters that our body releases through movement. And that's one of the big reasons why I like to exercise and move myself, because I feel that. But it gives us a sense of empowerment to move your body. And if we're exercising our functional movement patterns, then we are allowing our body to just move better throughout the day, to exercise the pushing motion, the pulling motion, the squatting, lunging, a rotate, hip hinge. We're allowing our body to function every day much, much better so we can carry out our duties. So I want to pass it back over to Chelsey here, or is she busy? She's busy, she says. She's busy feeding the baby, the toddler, as usual, she says. Earth gym is really important too. I think we kind of talked about this in the last one. For those of you that are, the gym is shut down, you can be out on the land, use rocks, use logs, use hills, use all of that. Use the Mother Earth right there to strengthen your body. And those things offer different challenges, because when you're out there on the land, to try to pick up a big boulder or a rock or whatever, no matter what size it is, it's a little awkward. It doesn't have these comfortable, convenient handles. The surface you're standing on is most likely unlevel. So you're offering more challenge for your body too. Even if you're just taking a swift incline walk up a trail, that's Earth Gym. So don't forget to utilize that out there. And that's something we've been talking about for a number of years. We have some videos on our YouTube, Well for Culture, sharing about where Earth Gym is. Excuse me. If you follow us on Instagram, we post a lot about that on our personal accounts and Well for Culture Instagram account. So Earth Gym is an important one. And the fourth the fourth circle of wellness is peacefulness, is ceremony. Ceremony, having ceremony to create peacefulness in your life, having some modality of activity or something that brings peace, that helps to reduce our stress. and yeah, and gratitude ceremonies and things like that. So we know that it's important because in our world today we live in a high stress environment. We also know that we have intergenerational trauma from the previous generations, that every generation is tasked to heal that. And so this is why it's important that this is a one of the main components of our life and our healing journey, is to have some modality that brings you peace. Meditation, prayer, ceremony, talking circles, um, continuing to be grateful and have gratitude every day, utilizing your smudges, mindful breathing, practicing mindfulness. All these things are ways, yoga, all these things are ways to bring peacefulness to your life to help with our healing journey. And so, as we know today, usually when we think of meditation and such, it comes from all of our Eastern relatives in the Eastern part of the world. But we know that our ancestors had various forms of that. And so I encourage everyone to go in and talk to your knowledge bearers, talk to your elders, and find out what those practices were. Even Chelsey talks about this a lot. The practice of sitting in silence, acknowledging everything around you, pushing out your thoughts, and just being right here inside of your heart, and really connecting with your environment. There's many different ways to do that. So having peacefulness is a really important one in your life right there. And so we're going to move on. And the next circle of wellness is a connection to our Mother Earth. That's a really important one to have. As we know, our culture today has us indoors, in the comfort of our own homes and in solitude, presenting like this, doing a Zoom or doing a Facebook Live with lighting and microphones. And, we're very much sedentary. We're very much inside in our culture, but it's important that we get out on the land once again, whether that be to do earth gym, whether that be to cultivate the land, to forage the land, to hunt, to fish the land, and to get out and to breathe. Do mindful breathing out there on the land, high up as you can, close to Creator, to connect us and ground us, to maintain that connection. Because now we're surrounded by technology. Right now, I'm sitting in front of all these electromagnetic radio frequencies just blaring everywhere. But when we're out on the land, we're away from all that, and that not only helps reduce our stress, but it brings our sense of connection to our original giver of life, which is our Mother Earth. So maintaining that connection as individuals, as families, as communities is really important for our health and well-being. And so there's two more right here. Oh, excuse me. Two more. One more circle of wellness is family and community. You want to cover that, or should I keep babbling?
Oh, you skipped sacred space.
Oh yeah, go ahead, jump into that.
Okay. We're actually going to go back into sacred space, which is our sixth circle of wellness. And let's see, I'm going to stand here. So when we talk about our sacred space, we're referring to your home, your office, really anywhere that you spend a lot of time. And what we mean is anything that's sacred is something that you have reverence for. So understanding that the environment of your home in different ways will impact your personal sense of health and well-being, and it will impact your emotions, your ability to function properly, and all of those mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional components, which, as you'll notice, I'm sure you've already realized this, each of the circles we mention do encompass mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. So your space is no different. Ways that you can help make your space a more serene or peaceful or welcoming place is one, by letting in the natural light. I know a lot of us like to totally cover our curtains and keep it dark and let the screens in the home blare, but that's going to really impact our vitamin D levels and our ability to feel happiness, really. So letting in a little bit of natural sunlight, opening a window, letting in a fresh breeze, keeping your space, if it's something that's of value to you, which it is for Thosh and I, keeping your space substance free. No alcohol, no drugs allowed in the home. You have the ability to assert that, then please do so if it keeps your space more safe. Minimizing electronic devices and all of the central areas of the home can really help foster spaces that are more centered on movement and communication and food as opposed to being centered on the TV. Keeping your space as clean, as tidy, and as possible, and having access to real food and your traditional medicine. So, just a real quick speed through that. And then our next circle, we have just a couple of minutes left. We're going to talk about family and community. So, this is a circle that is very central to an Indigenous perspective on wellness, but you're not necessarily going to hear a mainstream wellness professional talk about the importance of these things. But as we know, our families and our communities are absolutely central to who we are as Indigenous people. And so fostering those relationships and understanding that those are directly and intricately tied into our personal sense of health and well-being is very important. So one is when we embrace those relationships, we have a better sense of belonging. And we can create that sense of belonging for our other community members who might not necessarily have it in the home. Another is to support others' wellness journeys. So we know that wellness is hard enough as it is on your own if you're personally committed and motivated to living a healthier lifestyle or making changes. It's all the more difficult if you don't have moral support in that. So try to be a support person for someone and try to refrain from any sort of judgment or other issues that might be passed on to another family member who is trying to make those efforts. Fostering confidence. When we gather as families and as communities, we feel, again, a deeper sense of who we are, and it really fosters confidence, especially in our youth. And then, of course, it just strengthens the community as a whole. So the more that we really focus on maintaining our community gatherings, whether that's ceremonial or whether it's something through youth programming on your tribe or whatever it may be, if it has an educational facet to it, there's all different ways of going about these gatherings, and it's really important to support these and to participate and understand the ways in which, especially for our young people, this can really foster a sense of self-confidence, which will lend itself in many, many different ways to the wellness journey. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we're just, again, like we said before, there's a lot to cover, but we just kind of want to speed through that and share that. Again, that's 7 circles of wellness. It's food, it's sleep, movement, ceremony, sacred space, connection to land, and connection to family, community, your kinship, your clan system, whatever that is for you. So those are 7 areas. Think about it again as a template to kind of follow and insert all of your different tribes, your nation's teachings and practice, languages, all that into those different areas, because those are the ways our ancestors didn't have this mapped out like that. It was just inherent to their way of life. They had they were in good standing in all of those 7 areas of their life. So this is something that affects our spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional well-being. It's associated with teachings such as love, honor, respect, compassion, gratitude. All of these things, teachings, are associated with that, of course. And with food is also water, our relationship to water right there. So again, we want to thank you for bearing with us. We're swapping back and forth. We have our toddler in the background that she likes to be the center of attention, so we got to kind of juggle her back and forth when we're doing these presentations. So thanks for bearing with us. As some of you may know and can imagine, it's a little hard trying to present to a screen right here when all I see is comments and I see myself. It's hard because we're people that are really based in energetic connections. I can feel your energy in some ways if I really focus, but a lot of times we like being in the presence of our other Native people and talking about this conversation of health and wellness. We like being in the presence of other Native people in teaching movement and working with food. And so it's a little difficult to do it in this way. So thank you guys for bearing with us. It took me a minute to kind of get in there and start kind of getting in the groove of things. So before we leave, does anyone have any quick questions? Don't forget, tomorrow is the funny Casey Nicholson. He's going to be jumping on. He's hilarious. check don't forget to check that out. Laughter is one of our also important medicines too. Let's see. And thank you again also to the rest of all of our Native Wellness Institute staff, the Native Wellness Institute board members, all of the foundations that contributed to us, the Noise Foundation. Thank you to all of the support across Native country for supporting the Native Wellness Institute, supporting our work here as we take all of our training, we take all of our work right here online, and to try to adjust to reach the people. And so we're indigenizing technology, we're evolving, we're adapting to our environment, adapting to our land. That's the way our ancestors have always done. So we get a couple more. Someone said, any tips on how to use juniper in food, Jasmine? I don't have any tips since I don't come from a place with juniper, but hopefully someone can teach us about that. That would be great to know about juniper. I'm not sure if you mean ash too. I know that we use ash almost like a baking soda in this regions as well. Let's see who else. Any else got anything to say? Someone said beautiful presentation. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Again, we had some slides that we wanted to share with you to give you more of a visual representation of things, but I couldn't figure out how to share the screen once I got in here. It was no longer showing it to me. So again, I apologize for that. Let's see any more comments in there. I think that's it. So thank you all again for tuning in. Our initiative is Well for Culture, and you can follow us on Instagram. We're on there. We post a lot. We have a YouTube channel where we don't update as much as we'd like to, but we're on there as well. And our website is wellforculture.com. And so again, my name is Thosh Collins. I'm from the Onakamirot. I'm the Salt River people. And my wife, Chelsey Luger, is from the Turtle Mountain Chippewa people, Standing Rock Sioux. And we live in Phoenix together, right outside of my community, right outside of Salt River, with our daughter, whose name is Aloe. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And we look. Aloe waved when I said her name. So thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. We look forward to the next one. Sapo, tahugay.